It was supposed to be the fairy tale ending, the love story that proved everyone wrong, the rebirth of Blac Chyna, strong, rebranded, reborn, and the loyal king by her side, Milano. But just when the countdown to the aisle should have started, everything went silent. No date, no dress, no I do, just a void where love used to be. And the deeper you look, the stranger it gets. There was no press release, no official statement, no, we've decided to go our separate ways, just silence. That loud kind of silence that makes fans start asking questions. A few weeks ago, their engagement was all over social media. Now, you couldn't even find a shadow of it. The photos, gone. The captions, deleted. The comments, turned off. It wasn't just a breakup, it was a vanishing act. But that wasn't the whole story. Just a few months ago, Blac Chyna and Milano were everywhere. And not just together, they were magnetic, holding hands at events, whispering during interviews, posting long captions that felt more like open love letters. Their chemistry was so thick, you could feel it through the screen. It wasn't forced, it wasn't staged. It felt raw, like two people who had found comfort in each other's chaos. They shared matching outfits, date night selfies, videos of stolen kisses and spiritual affirmations. To their followers, it was the kind of love that looked healing, like they were rebuilding each other in real time. And people believed it. They wanted to believe it. But then, like a light switch flipped, everything changed. The pictures stopped, the posts stopped, the energy gone. And what made it even stranger, there was no explanation. One minute they were planning forever, the next they were acting like they'd never met. Derek's comments on her page disappeared. Her captions went from "my twin flame" to "protect your peace." It was subtle at first, easy to miss if you weren't paying attention, but fans were paying attention, and they started asking questions Chyna never answered. That silence was louder than anything she could have said, and the more private she got, the more obvious it became. Something had shifted behind the scenes, because love that loud doesn't go quiet unless something breaks. And once people started digging, they found more than they expected. On the surface, everything looked perfect. The smiles, the compliments, the way Derek held her hand like he was protecting something sacred. But anyone who knows how this industry works knows that Instagram doesn't tell the full story, especially when the stakes are high. And with Blac Chyna's rebrand in full swing, the stakes had never been higher. Sources close to the couple revealed that things behind the scenes were nothing like the fairy tale they were posting. There weren't screaming matches or public blow-ups. That's what made it more complicated. The problem wasn't chaos, it was control. It wasn't about what was happening, but who was steering the ship. Blac Chyna, who had just spent the last year stripping away layers of her old identity, literally and spiritually, was finally reclaiming her peace. She wasn't trying to be the center of attention anymore. She wasn't chasing headlines, she was chasing healing. But Derek, he was still plugged into that world. He wasn't a villain, he just didn't want to disappear. He was still active in the industry, still making moves, still wanting his partner to be a part of that fast-paced lifestyle. And Chyna, she was slowing down, stepping back, choosing quiet over chaos. And that's where the tension started to build. There were disagreements, not loud but heavy. Disagreements about privacy, about image, about what comes next. Derek reportedly wanted to do interviews as a couple, maybe even a reality series down the line. He saw their relationship as a power move, two forces joining together, not just in love but in brand. But Chyna had already played that game, and it nearly destroyed her. For her, love wasn't about exposure anymore. It was about protection, about having one sacred part of her life that didn't have to be broadcast to the world. And that's when the energy shifted. She stopped posting him, not out of malice, but preservation. He stopped showing up, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't understand the silence. One source described it perfectly. They weren't fighting to hurt each other. They were fighting to be understood, and neither one felt seen anymore. It was a slow unraveling, hidden behind perfect pictures and curated captions. But when you start editing your relationship for the world, instead of living it for each other, the cracks eventually show. And for Chyna and Derek, the cracks became chasms. What looked like a fairy tale in photos was actually two people growing apart frame by frame. And once the camera stopped flashing, so did the illusion. This wasn't the same Blac Chyna from 2018, not even close. She had dropped the old name, reversed her surgeries, gotten baptized, and walked away from toxic fame. Everything about her screamed transformation. And Derek, he loved her. But he also loved the version of her that had teeth, that had edge, that had headlines. They were evolving in opposite directions, and no matter how much they cared about each other, evolution doesn't always happen in sync. That disconnect was only getting deeper. They were supposed to be each other's peace, but peace is hard to hold when the cameras are always flashing. Behind the scenes, there were whispers, not arguments, but tension. Derek didn't like being seen as Mr. Blac Chyna. He wanted his own lane, his own voice. And Chyna, she was trying to fade from fame, not amplify it. It was like two people holding hands while running toward opposite exits. They wanted love, but they couldn't agree on what love looked like anymore. And that's when the cracks started showing. The signs were everywhere. Once you knew where to look, Chyna stopped liking Derek's posts. He stopped commenting on hers. No more joint events, no more double date interviews, and not a single hint of wedding planning. It wasn't just private, it was cold. One insider said Derek had booked a venue. Another said Chyna never signed the deposit check. Whatever happened, it wasn't last minute. It had been unraveling quietly for weeks, until it wasn't quiet anymore. If you ask Chyna's people, they'll tell you it was her decision, flat out. She didn't feel safe, one source said. She felt like she was being boxed in, another added. One of her close friends gave the most chilling quote of all. She said it felt like walking into a cage dressed like a wedding. That wasn't a breakup, that was an escape. But Derek had his own side of the story. Derek didn't air any dirty laundry. He didn't drag her name or throw shade. But his actions spoke louder than any words. He unfollowed her, deleted every trace of their engagement from his page, pulled out of scheduled events, and then disappeared from the public eye. Some say he was blindsided. Others say he knew it was coming and just didn't want to be the one to end it. Either way, he walked away with silence, and that silence said everything. But that's not where the mystery ends. Since the breakup, Chyna hasn't said a word about Derek. Not one. She's been posting selfies, cryptic quotes, and soft rebrands of her life, but not a single mention of the man she was supposed to marry. No new chapter post, no heartbreak anthem, just stillness. But when you look at the captions, the timing, the tone, it's obvious. She left because something didn't sit right, and she chose to walk away before things got ugly. That decision didn't need a press release, it just needed peace. That's the question now floating around online. Some fans are wondering if the whole relationship was just for PR, a feel-good redemption arc to go with Chyna's image makeover. Others believe it was real love that burned out too fast. But one industry insider summed it up like this. They both came into the relationship healing, and sometimes two people in recovery can't build a future because they're still trying to rebuild themselves. And when you put it like that, it all makes sense. But the damage was already done. There was no scandal, no viral moment, no caught on camera betrayal, just two people who decided quietly and separately to let go of what could have been. No joint interviews, no delayed wedding, just done. And if you look closely, they've both started moving on, but not without leaving a few questions in their wake. Sometimes the loudest endings don't need noise. Sometimes the deepest heartbreaks don't need drama. Blac Chyna didn't cancel her wedding for clout. She did it for clarity. And Derek Milano didn't fight it. He let the silence speak. Now, all that remains is the question nobody's brave enough to ask out loud. What happened behind closed doors? That made walking away feel safer than saying I do. And that's a question only they can answer. Please like and subscribe if you like the vibes by Clyde.